good to feel a little confident in 2023 after the last few years have been a little weird. And we know that for 2023, pipeline is going to be critical. And there's 5 things that people have been asking about all year long. The 5 things are events, digital ads, inbound, outbound, and content. You have to crush these 5 things in 2023. You have to. It's non-negotiable. So we brought in 5 experts, 5 people who know these 5 things inside and out, that have been there and done that, so they can share their playbooks with you. This is no fluff. It's the Pipeline Power Hour. So we're going to get right into it. Grab a dumbbell, grab a shot glass. It's a power hour after all. First up, Julie Liegl, former CMO of Slack. She's going to share her perspective on events. Pipeline Power Hour, Julie Liegl, so excited to have you. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we are thrilled to talk events. Obviously, you have done many B2B events over the years with Slack and at Salesforce. So in your mind, how do events fit into pipeline generation?
I think it's a mistake to think that it's a one size fits all answer. I do think events are usually at their most effective when they are closing and upsell events, but events can play different roles at different times in your pipeline. So, going to third party events can be a great way to do prospect generation. Similarly, I've seen very high end sort of bespoke experiences serve that purpose with executives who may not be willing to engage with you, but are willing to come to some really very special experience that you do. But a lot of the events that I worked on, especially at Salesforce, that were our bread and butter, were about people that were further down the funnel who were either getting closer to ready to make a decision, or customers who are looking to increase the value of the software that they had already purchased, the systems they were already using, and also figure out, are there additional things that they wanted to do with it. And the reason I think that can be so effective, especially in hosted events as opposed to third party events, is it does require an investment on somebody else's part to come and spend time with you. So, is a cold prospect going to come to, a 2-day user conference and spend all that time with you if they don't really understand what you do yet? No, you're probably going to need something smaller and a lower investment on their part before they get involved. And so having somebody who's a little further down the funnel, I think that is the real sweet spot of what people traditionally think of big conferences, seminars, and things like that.
Yeah, what you're saying there is almost more like part executive briefing center, part event. If you're able to bring those folks in that are, to accelerate pipeline and get them to meet with a bunch of your big wigs that are all there at this event, which is pretty hard to do, on a normal everyday basis.
Yeah, I mean, I think the beauty of a big event. So certainly there are great bespoke event executive experiences you can do within the events. The great thing about a big event is you can bring that almost executive briefing outcome, which is a chance to interact with your product, to meet people from your company who can explain your product, to hear from other customers, to a broader audience. So, you might do an executive briefing center. Like certainly we did one at Dreamforce every year. We hosted hundreds of executive briefings. But I also like to think that a lot of the people out on the show floor who were not part of the executive briefings, who maybe weren't executive levels, were at some of our smaller customer or the like, got a lot of that same experience because they got to see the feature. They got to get their questions answered. They got to drill in on topics that matter to them. They got to talk to customers and to like product experts from Salesforce. So in some ways, a great event can scale that experience as well.
How should teams measure success or outcomes when it comes to events?
It's a great question. I think part of the question is, how do you decide what to measure? And I think that goes back to, what is your intention? I think one thing that Salesforce always did very well, and we also were really good about Slack, is like, why are we doing this? I think there can be a habit, especially in the pre-pandemic times, of let's put on an event. Everybody puts on events. Let's put on an event without really thinking about what you're trying to achieve. So I think it's important to decide what you're trying to achieve and design those measures after that. If it is a prospect event, if it is, I'm going to go to a third party event because we're breaking into an industry where we don't have a ton of customers yet. So I'm going to go to an industry focused event to get myself in front of those people. Then I think it could be about new names, meetings achieved, demos given, things like that. You may not want to measure that directly to pipeline because maybe that's too high up the funnel. I know events that I've done that are a little bit further down the funnel, it's sometimes not just pipeline generated because maybe you're already touching pipeline that existed. Maybe it's, did that pipeline close faster? Did it close at a higher rate? Were we able to generate upsell opportunities, 6 to 12 months afterwards? Or if it was a customer event, did we drive multi-product adoption? So I think you should be really intentional about that. I think it can be very easy to look at an event and say, we're going to measure scans, or we're going to measure how many people came to these sessions. And those can be great and meaningful if they tie to the reason you did the event in the first place and what you were trying to achieve. So I think you need to be really thoughtful and go in understanding what are the behaviors you're trying to drive, and then decide how to measure those and sort of what your goals will be.
Yeah, it seems like you're almost advocating for more of like a portfolio approach to doing events where it's like big, small, medium, having, senior leaders at certain things, more the users at one level, kind of like hitting the whole buying committee with sort of different parts and different types of events. Is that fair to put words in
Yeah,
your
I
mouth?
mean, in some ways, I think very much in my career and at the companies that I've worked at, that's how we looked at events. And, Salesforce is sort of known, we were an events first company in many, many ways. And so we use them in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different styles and sizes. And we really did build out a portfolio that met different needs. You might have a different type of product. You might have a different, you know, point in your marketing journey where different things are working. But if you find that you have a need that can be met with an event, and there's great reasons to do it, it's a great way to build trust. If you've got a complicated product, an expensive product, buyers want to have that face-to-face interaction, then think about what point in the pipeline do you want to introduce that to. And I think start your portfolio from there. Certainly at Salesforce, we didn't start with the huge portfolio we had. We started small and we grew it based on the expanding needs that we had as a marketing organization, as a company.
Yeah, with virtual events being so big now, and in-person events being back, it almost seems like people go to those two things for almost very different reasons. Like this event versus, meeting us when we did our qualified event during Dreamforce this past year, like totally different things. You and I shared a beer, and et cetera, et cetera. So like, how do you think about virtual versus in person?
Yeah, I mean, I still remember the beginning of the pandemic and everyone, freaking out and canceling events. And then everything went virtual. And it was like, this is great. I can have 10 times as many people at 1/10 the cost. Like, this is amazing. And of course, what we all quickly figured out is virtual events are amazing. They play their role and they also do not replace the in person. So I think virtual is amazing for, you talk about it takes an investment to come and spend time with you. Well, maybe people further up the funnel aren't willing to certainly travel to a new city or even take a day out of their office or out of their home if they're working from home and go be somewhere physically with you for 3 to 4 hours. But they might be willing to drop on a virtual event for a half hour or an hour and kind of understand what you're talking about, hear from a couple of your customers, see your product in action. So I think virtual events give you this amazing ability to scale. They also give you this great way to extend your in-person events. I mean, at their heart, what events really are experiences that are engines for content. And so if you're creating all this content for 50, 100, 1,000, 5,000 people in a room, wouldn't it also be amazing to have the people who don't have the time, the resources, maybe the interest level yet in your product to come be in that room with you, to also gain something from that content? So doing an approach where you have both that in-person event and that virtual experience, I think is and should be the norm. It's certainly something we were doing even before the pandemic. But I do think it's hard to replace that in-person experience. And that is to the point of sharing a beer. It's the personal connection. It's the getting your questions answered. It's meeting a peer who may have a similar business challenges as you do and figuring out if you're looking for a solution together, can you get it answered there? Is there another customer you can learn from? And all those sort of informal ways that people connect. And then, of course, there's also the brand experience. Like, as much as we do online to tell our stories and stuff, an event is a 3D immersive experience. I don't know, maybe someday we'll wear headsets and do it from home, but you can't feel, you can't smell, you can't see, you can't experience the spectacle of a live event virtually. And because of that, I think we'll always want and always have a place for that in-person experience. But I think it's great we have both because, to your point, I think they play different roles. And I think you're best served as a marketer to think about how both fit into your portfolio.
Okay, we got 1 minute left here. I need some just quick advice
Okay.
on how the heck do we drive attendees? Because it's so freaking hard.
You know, it's funny. That's kind of how I started in events. I wasn't like the traditional events person. I was the demand gen person that was like, how do we fill the room? And I would say, first and foremost, it requires a demand gen mind. It's, you don't build it and they will come. You have to, just the way you sell, an offer or your product, an event is another offer. So, what is in it for them? Like, be concrete. And we would put together, for all of our events, campaigns that were multi-touch, and maybe the first one was about save the date and sort of getting excitement amongst existing believers who had gone before, but then maybe further on, like top 5 things you'll learn there, or here we've announced a speaker, and we would architect it out to kind of build that excitement along the way. So I think you need to be really intentional about it. You need to segment those lists. You need to think about who you want to be there, and it's not just something you throw to someone who's never done demand gen before. It's not inviting someone to your birthday party. This is a campaign, just like any integrated campaign you would do. And if you don't get the people there, all that effort and money that you've put into the event won't matter. So take it seriously and resource for a true demand gen program for your events.
Anyone that you added in your career that jumped the attendee list, like Bruno Mars headlining or Michelle Obama headlining, or anybody come to mind?
Oh my goodness. No, but I will tell you my absolute favorite email we ever sent was we announced Metallica with an early bird pricing expiration date. And Metallica actually, talent has to approve these emails when they're in them.
Yeah.
And it was like only 5 more days till early bird pricing goes off to Never Never Land, with like a big picture of Metallica as the subhead under like Metallica announced at Dreamforce. So I can't say that one jumped at the most, but I still, I mean, that had to have been 10 years ago. And I still think back to that email and giggle a little bit about how cute it was.
Julie, you're the best. Thanks again. Thanks so much for chatting with us. Any final thoughts?
No, but it's great that Qualified is doing a virtual event, and I hope everyone's having a great time and learning a ton during this power hour.
Thanks again, Julie. You are awesome. And events are going to be so important in 2023. So thanks for sharing that stuff. Up next, I'm going to chat with Jason from Metadata, and we're talking about digital advertising. Pipeline, Power, Hour. Jason, how the heck
I'm
are
doing
you?
great, man. That sounded ominous, but like strong. I like it.
that's our vibe here for the Pipeline Power Hour. Ominous but strong. Okay, today we're going to talk about digital advertising, how it fits into your broader marketing strategy. Jason, how can digital ad teams just make sense of what's going on and not fall into the trap of vanity metrics?
Yes, the good old vanity metrics. So the reason we fall into these traps of vanity metrics is because they are the easiest to measure, right? So like it's easy for me to tell what my click-through rate is because it's coming from the same system and it's looking at the impressions and the clicks, and it's just it's just dividing it and giving me a percent. It's easy for me to understand cost per click because again, it's coming from the same system. I've got my spend and I've got my clicks, and so it's very easy to tell that. But it's when you start to cross these systems that it starts to get a little bit more difficult. But that's where these non-vanity metrics lie. So now I need to know my cost per opportunity, or I need to know my cost per, some other deeper metric, cost per revenue or cost per dollar of revenue. And so now I've got to make sure that the data is very cleanly being passed from, one of these systems, my ad system, over to my CRM, and so that I can actually see that cost per opportunity and understand that and have it connect. But for me, it comes down to like the reason why I want to focus on non-vanity metrics, like what would we call them? Like revenue-based metrics, is because I just don't want there to be any confusion at all about marketing's impact to the bottom line. And so if I stop at a more of a vanity metric, like even MQLs, like let's say I stop at MQL and that's what I report on, there can always be this conversation about, well, your MQLs don't turn into revenue. And so if I stop at MQLs, I don't really have that defense, that I can say, well, no, look, this is actually how it impacts the bottom line. And so you can't really argue. And I just don't want there to be any confusion, any argument at all about our impact. And I think one of the reasons marketers stay in that area is that I think there's fear, right? There's fear that like, okay, if I move downstream, I'm going to be found out. And that's if my MQLs actually are shit and they're not great at turning into revenue, then I might be found out. And so I think there's some hesitation too in moving from vanity metrics over to deeper revenue and pipeline metrics.
But what about all those folks that are already lurking? They're on the fence. They're out there. They're looking at all sorts of different content, dark social, dark web, all this stuff. Maybe not dark web. What about all those folks engaging with your paid?
So what do you mean? So just like what about them?
Yeah, how are you making sure that that those folks are tied back to revenue?
Yeah. So, I mean, most people are using cookies, UTM parameters. They're trying to follow them when they click an ad or click an ad to a website. I primarily am using email address, so I'm not that interested in having somebody sign up for like register for content or give me their email address for a piece of content, only when they're actually requesting a demo. And so once they request a demo, I've got their email address and I'm going to follow that down through the different systems and use that as a connection point, because that seems to be, well, it is stronger than trying to rely on cookies and UTMs and things like that. And so, yeah, we pretty much try and just follow an email address from the time they raise their hand until they either are in a meeting, have an opportunity, created, win, loss a deal, that kind of thing.
What channel's working for you right now? Own, earn, paid media?
So when it comes to impact to revenue, it's primarily been paid media. But over the last, 6 months or so, we've really improved our website. We've got our content engine really running. We've got a new community, our demand event. So we're seeing almost all, that's a little high, but almost all of our qualified demand is coming in via our owned channels now. And so much so that we're actually on a plan to voluntarily pull back our spend on paid ads by a pretty decent percent over the next 5 months, because I just kind of want to be more, well, just because so much of that qualified demand is coming through our own channels, I want to focus more on those owned channels and use paid media in a little bit of a different way. And that's just kind of part of our growth too. Kind of part of our growth strategy was to really use paid ads really heavily up front, at the same time get the organic content audience community going. And then at some point when that started to feed us enough, then we would pull back. And so we're kind of at that inflection point now, starting to do that.
Yeah, using that paid as a lever that you can, push forward or pull back at any time while you're working on the other stuff.
Yeah, and to do that, you got to plan quite a bit ahead, because it does take quite a bit of time for these other non-paid channels to really start to deliver. Because if you expect them to deliver right away, then you're probably going to do it the wrong way. Or if you have like these really high goals around, well, I need my organic content to start performing in the next 2 to 3 months against revenue, you're already too late. And so yeah, having that long game thinking and then using paid as, like you said, as a wedge or a lever until you get to that point, that was our strategy. And we spend a lot on paid today. And so probably more than most companies of our size, I would guess. And I kind of know that because a lot of our customers are our size or a little bit bigger.
Wedge-based marketing brought to you by Jason. So where the heck should people be spending their money? Where are you spending money? You doing LinkedIn, Facebook, you doing TikTok? What's working?
Yeah, I mean, we're B2B. We're mostly on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook quite a bit, but that's because we have our own platform to help us target there. So, but that still seems to be, even folks that don't have like a B2B targeting for Facebook seem to still spend quite a bit of money on Facebook too. Yeah, that honestly for us, that's really a majority of our ad dollars. We don't really spend much anywhere else. We don't do a lot of Google search. Sometimes we kind of dabble in it a little bit. I'm seeing some of our customers, though, if they're a little bit more experimental, some of our customers are trying out channels like Reddit and Quora, and they're having success there. Like some of our customers are having pretty good success on Quora, honestly. More like the IT, like maybe the deeper IT, cybersecurity folks maybe might have more success there. And Reddit, of course, takes a very specific style to work on Reddit. But if you know that style, then you can get that to work. And TikTok. Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of B2B ads directed to me on TikTok yet, but I'm seeing a lot of B2B content on TikTok. So my guess is, they're starting there and then they're going to start to do ads after they maybe build up their profile a little bit. But yeah, I don't know how TikTok works yet. I just know how to watch TikTok.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how I feel with like LinkedIn video right now, where it's like if you're publishing videos on LinkedIn and it's reaching hundreds and thousands of people and all that stuff, it's like why pay for those ads when you can make them for free? And I think that that's kind of the same sort of thing with TikTok right now, is people are making the content for free, and so kind of thinking like, why am I paying for it when I can make it for free right this second?
Yeah, one of our strategies as we're pulling back on spend is we use LinkedIn organic maniacally. I don't know, that's probably not the right word, but we use it a lot internally. Yeah. And our strategy is we're marketers selling to marketers, so it makes it easy for us to connect. I can just have a target account list that we're trying to sell to, and I can just take that over to LinkedIn. I can just start to connect with the marketers over there, and they'll connect with me because, hey, it's a VP of marketing, just like me. So sounds good. And then we end up just using that as a content distribution mechanism. And so we don't do a lot of salesy stuff. We do maybe 10-15% of our posts would be about the product. The rest are how-tos. How am I doing this? What happened over there? We try not to do too much like, sappy stuff, I guess, a little bit, but just more useful content. And that'll be a bigger part of our strategy going forward as well.
Yeah, a little 80-20 rule there for value add versus sales type posts.
Yep, exactly. Some gives before a get.
All right, Jason. Yeah, exactly. Someone wrote about that one time. All right, we got 1 minute left. Any final thoughts or advice on digital advertising?
No, I just think I'll just touch on targeting real quick. I think, really think about targeting. It all starts with targeting, right? So if you really want to waste the least amount of, we're all wasting money on ads. If you want to waste the least amount of money, you got to get really good with targeting. And so my suggestion there and what I do is I try and go outside the bounds of what everybody else uses to target. So if I'm using industry and job title and all these basic things, that's the exact same data that my competitors are using. And so I can't expect to be really any better at targeting than they are. And so I tend to create my own signals, my own targeting data, really by combining data from a lot of different sources. And so I just recommend any company that really wants to win on targeting, which is an easy way to win, really double down on that. Find your unique data points that really help describe your best customers and go find a way to get that data, because it's probably not readily available. And that can actually be a competitive differentiator for you.
Quick example
for myself. I wrote a program that goes and scrapes LinkedIn and counts the number of ads every company has out there. And I use it as a proxy for how much money they spend on advertising, because we have a minimum ad spend threshold in our platform for you to be for it to make sense even. And so I can really curate and reduce my list, because otherwise it's all B2B companies that are advertising. Well, that's probably not great. So yeah, I use that. I built that about a year and a half ago.
Thanks again, Jason. Always great chatting with you. Next up, we're going to be talking with Qualified Zone, Sarah McConnell, to talk all things inbound. Pipeline, Power Hour, inbound marketing. Sarah, how are you?
I'm good, Ian. How are you doing?
Excited to chat inbound with you and everything that's going on at Qualified and all the amazing demand that you all are creating. How do you define inbound marketing?
Inbound marketing is anytime someone comes to us and is expressing interest. So anything marketing is doing that's helping drive pipeline, and prospects are coming to us, they found out about us, they know about us, and they're interested. So I think a lot of times it gets tied to marketing for a good reason, because a lot of the effort that marketing is doing to drive awareness and demand.
And what's your strategy to identify your ideal customer profile and think about persona?
Yeah, I think it's changed a little bit over time. When I first joined the company and we were much smaller, it was really just looking at very small sample sizes and saying who's buying from us right now? And that was sort of our general idea. I think as we've grown larger and we're talking about how to refine our ICP or our personas, we start looking at closed won revenue now that we have a bigger sample size. And we're trying to identify out of our deal cycles, what's the most common titles that are in there? Or can we find any commonalities between the champions in those programs? And are there any trends that we're seeing? So we're looking at if we see certain things about our champions, are the deal sizes bigger? Are they moving at a faster rate? Are they closing at a higher rate? And then we're going to spend a lot more of our time, budget, and effort in marketing, focusing on those personas. In our case, a lot of times it's titles, but it can be different at every company, because we've seen from a revenue perspective that they're the most impactful in buying cycles and deal size.
Yeah, like a good one would be like people who just raised 50 million bucks or more, right?
Yep.
It's like if you just raised Series C, then like that could be someone who's in your persona. And I think that that's one of the things that has really evolved over the years, to think about not just, hey, Fortune 100 or Global 2000, but like what are the mechanisms that sort of drive that ideal customer?
And everyone's is different. Like for us, it's technographic. So we don't sell to you unless you have Salesforce, and you have to have a certain amount of website traffic, and we know titles are better. So there's a whole lot of things going into our personas. And typically we have a pretty good idea, but we come back to it frequently to refine, look at reports, and see if we should make any tweaks on where we're focusing our time.
And then that buying committee, there's all sorts of different folks in these modern B2B buying committees. Sometimes that's like 10, 15 people.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think about that?
Yeah, so typically we try to push our team really hard for good data hygiene when we look at buying committees. We obviously want to be able to measure as much as we can. So if we have a large buying committee, we want to put an annotation to who they are in the buying committee. So we've got our champions, we've got our decision makers, our budget holders, our influencers. And that helps us from a marketing perspective if we have all of that data and we start to understand, are there certain things about our ICP that impact where they're at in our buying committee? And again, it just helps us refine our marketing, our effort, our audience, and our segmentation. So I think as the buying committees get bigger, having the best data hygiene possible so you can identify who all those people are and what role that they're playing in your deals is just only going to help your marketing get better.
How do you think about personalization?
So I think, as personally, personalization is huge. I think people have just become so accustomed to having personalized buyer journeys. B2C teaches us a lot about what to expect, whether we know it or not. It just sets the expectation for us. So for us, personalization, I'm going to make a little pitch for Qualified, but we use a lot of our own product, our experiences and chatbots that pop up to drive some sort of personalization, whether you are on a specific page we can reference, you click through a specific campaign or an outbound email. But I think even bigger than that, and what we've learned from our own product, is personalization is just a lot more than throwing in a dynamic field and saying, hi, Ian, like, welcome to our website. One, it's great, but it's kind of just table stakes now. And two, when you get it wrong, it creates a really bad experience. We've actually found in our own way that we call digital body language is like, what are people doing? What are they showing from an intent perspective? What are they interested in? What are they doing actively on your website? That's probably a better indicator of what they care about in that moment. And if you use that in your personalization, in your messaging, when you're talking to them, it's probably going to have a lot higher impact than just saying like, hey, Ian, welcome to our site today, or something like that. So that digital body language and intent, I think, is a huge component to how you can do better personalization. And it's what we really focus on from a personalization standpoint.
Yeah, and it seems like one of the ways that y'all have done personalization so well is with your content. I call this the edutainment portfolio, but these B2B content portfolios that personalize by series, by persona. How do you all think about that, and how did you think about doing it?
Yeah, similar to the first question, is going through our ICP and understanding who's involved in our buying process. So for us, it's marketing, revenue operations. We're really deep into Salesforce. So we started to create content around those personas. So how can we reach them? How can we just keep our brand in front of them? And not always a salesy way. Like, they're going to be somewhere different in their buyer's journey, but just because they're not looking to buy from us right now doesn't mean we shouldn't give them something personalized and important to them. So working those personas and having those be the driving audience for our content creation is how we came up with our Demand Gen Visionaries podcast and our Rise of Revenue Ops podcast. It's really the content we know our personas want to hear about, and it really helps us in that personalization journey.
Yeah, and I think it's so cool because people always get worried about how do you start, right? But I think sometimes people lose sight of the fact of like what happens when you're there. Like DGV has 100 episodes. Rise of RevOps has, I think we're at 20 plus episodes. Inside the Ohana has a bunch of episodes out there. And when you start to look at these series, as you've done iteration after iteration, like they become these fully fledged little media properties just for that persona. And there's so much power in that.
Totally. And I love the way you put that. I think thinking about personalization as more than just a tactical thing of like throwing a dynamic field somewhere or personalizing based on company, your name. There's more to personalization that's also just meeting your buyers where they're at and giving them relevant content to what we think they're interested in. So I think personalization is just a bigger topic than sometimes we just shove it into populate dynamic fields and emails. And that's what we think of when we think personalization.
Yeah, and I think another part of this is the types of content that people, I hear a lot like, oh, we need a podcast or we need a blog post on this thing or a video. And I think that what we're seeing now is that what type of content, what
Yep.
type is it? A news show? Is it a personality driven show? Is it, two hosts, one host? Like, how do you do those things? And at the end of the day, like, some people like Marvel movies, some people like to watch 60 Minutes, and like how you personalize the content is so important.
Absolutely.
Any mistakes that you've seen as it relates to inbound?
I think mistakes I've seen as it relates to inbound is just making it harder for your buyers to buy from you. And I think that comes in, sometimes we talk about forms. I don't think it's just forms. I think if your buyers are showing interest in you, meet them where they're at. Like, don't make them jump through hoops to get there because it's so easy now. People have short attention span. They can just drop and move on to something else. So I think when it comes to inbound, if you've put in all the legwork, the budget, the time to drive awareness, someone's interested, they're on your site and they want to have a conversation with you, however you can make it easier, less fields, live conversations, video calls, whatever it is, meet them there and answer their questions and get them through the buying journey faster because you'll see it come out in revenue. If you can meet them there and answer their questions when they're most interested, you're going to get more pipeline and you're going to get more revenue. So just don't make your buyers jump through hoops. Try to keep that as frictionless as possible.
Yeah, I mean, if it takes more than 5 minutes to respond to a lead, like, stop what you're doing right now and like go fix that process before anything else in your entire marketing stack.
Just have such a short attention span. Like, I don't know, I lose attention before I even finish filling out a form. So I just think, yeah, to your point, Ian, keeping that process as concise and tight and short as possible is just going to benefit so much in your inbound pipeline.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts on conversational marketing? Obviously, you're the queen of conversational as the VP of Demand Gen at Qualified.
Yeah, I think I've spent a lot of time in conversational marketing. I do think it is a way to transform your website into driving more pipeline. I think we talked about it. It takes personalization beyond just throwing in company names and first names, and it can really help you talk to your buyers in a way that is relevant to what they're doing in that moment, how they're browsing your site, what they're looking at, all of that intent that they're giving you. So, if you're considering conversational marketing, think about where you would want to see improvements in your inbound marketing. If that's pipeline, which I think is everyone because we're at pipeline power hour, personalization, doing more with less. I think that's where conversational marketing is really going to help people out, especially during this time that we're in.
Yeah. Convert the people that are, that you're already working so hard to get. And I think that that's going to be the name of the game in Q4 and for sure in 2023.
Absolutely.
Sarah, thanks again for joining me today. Next up on the Pipeline Power Hour, Lauren Vaccarello here to discuss outbound marketing. Lauren, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Excited to have you on here today. And we're going to be talking about outbound, which you know all too well. So you just came into the role at Salesloft not too long ago. Mm-hmm. Tell us about outbound and how those marketers out there can take their outdated tech infrastructure and recharge it.
Awesome. Great question. So I am about 5 months into my role of CMO at Salesloft, and it's been super, super fun. So I think a lot about, as marketers, we think a lot about inbound marketing. We think a lot about outbound. And it's so easy for marketers to focus just on, here's the leads that come in the door. What do I do? I'm going to work with my SDR team. I'm going to build cadences. We'll figure out how to really optimize that funnel. But there's so much opportunity working with your outbound reps, whether they're your outbound SDRs or even your AEs, on how do you build that how do you build that cadence? How do you build that system, process, technology? So things that we do are, anytime you can align intent data with your outbound prospecting, you're going to have a material impact on what your conversion rates look like. So if you can pull in intent data, whether through using something like Qualified or G2 and saying, not just this company, but this person is in market right now, great lead to kick over to your sales team and say, now is the time to do that outbound outreach. And as marketers, we shouldn't just stop there. What can we do to set up some sort of automation, whether it's here's the content that you should have, here's a sequence, here's a cadence that you should start using, just to make the whole process easier.
And who's sending that stuff? Is that stuff coming from marketing? Is it coming from your SDRs? Is it coming from, BDRs? Like who's sending that stuff?
It should come from your BDRs, whether they're called BDRs or SDRs, but you're going to have a higher impact when you get those personalized one-to-one communications. As marketing, it's our responsibility to build the outlines and build some of the templates to give to the BDR team. But you'll get better results when your BDRs are the ones going out and actually setting that personalized communication.
Yeah. And how personalized should we be?
More than most do, to be perfectly honest. The idea of, I'm just going to copy and paste this template, your audience, no matter how interested they are going to be a lot less likely to respond. So the sort of sweet spot is personalize about 20% of your email. And by having that 20% personalization, you're going to get a better result.
Do you find that, again, it kind of seems like it's basic, but obviously most folks aren't doing it when it comes to personalization plus intent data for outbound. Why aren't people doing it, or what mistakes are they making?
I think a lot of it is it's a new motion. It's a new muscle. We'll give everyone the benefit of the doubt of once you know someone is interested, how do you do that? But part of it is it's that little bit of extra time and work. And I know sellers are under so much pressure right now. The world has changed. The economy has shifted. It is harder every single day to make your number. So a lot of sellers are just sort of in that mindset of, I just have to keep going. I need to do the volume game. I need to get as much out as possible. And that's almost the part of the downside of it is you're so focused on getting as much out. If you take that extra time, pause, focus on personalization, technically you're not getting as much out the door, but the quality is going to be higher and you'll get a better result.
Yeah, less is more, right? I mean, it seems that way, but I just feel like we get so much crap in our inbox all the time. Like, how do you not just be noisy? How do you not just be annoying?
It is. And it's like, how do you stand out in these situations? And it's one of the things I actually love about Qualified is the outbound prospecting that you can do on the website with the Qualified chat. So if you know that, Caspian Studios is on your website and they are a massive, massive prospect to you, to have your outbound SDR or have your AE see that that Ian from Caspian's on the website, have that initial sort of outreach come up on the website, have that communication. So you get intent, you get the timeliness, and then you take Ian from Caspian, you drop them into a sequence in your sales engagement tool. So you just keep going and keep that conversation going. That's how you're going to stand out, because you're going to capture them the moment that they're interested and you're going to keep that conversation going.
Is there something that you're doing to make sure that the pipeline is high quality? I mean, you mentioned obviously intent data being like a huge part of that. Mm-hmm. That's gonna definitely filter a ton. Anything else that you're doing for high quality pipe?
So we've actually aligned the entire organization around this idea of value use cases. So what's the real value that we're driving? So it's not about, it's this feature, it is about, this is the value. And we are aligned all the way from our brand awareness, our demand gen programs and marketing, to the cadences that our SDRs are using, to how the salespeople are selling, to what our sales engineering and value engineering teams are talking about, and how they're building everything is all aligned to these use cases. And then we pull that all the way into the delivery arm. So it's about, you're capturing pipeline with the right message, you're moving it through the funnel, and everyone's completely aligned. And the magic to that is once it comes time to deliver, you are saying the exact same thing that you said in the beginning.
What about channels? Like, how do you combine the right channels for outbound so that, again, you're not just spamming the same thing over and over and over again?
It's a great question. Honestly, a lot of this goes back to the data that you collect and how do you start to optimize. We can put best practices together and say, for an outbound cadence, it's going to take 12 touches and you need 3 phone calls and 2 voicemails, and you have these best practices. Start there, but you're going to get so much information in real time and be willing to test, to optimize, and to say, you know what, in this segment or in this geo or in this vertical, people respond to LinkedIn better. Let's focus there. So be willing to test, to try new things, and to optimize as you go.
Yeah, I had someone reach out to me the other day that was like, "Hey, I just left a 5-star review on Demand Gen Visionaries. Can I talk to you about et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?" And I saw they commented on some post too. And it's like, those are the sort of touches that I think add so much value to the person.
100%, because it shows that you actually engaged, you care, you're part of the process versus I'm going to click this button. I'm not going to actually really care. I'm just going to go through the motion. So I love that they did that. And I bet that made you say, all right, I'm going to pick up the phone, or I'm going to respond to this email.
Yeah, at least I'm going to read it, right? And I'm not going to just like archive the thread. The other thing, these sequences that are all pre-made, in the lab somewhere, that seem so stale, that are super long. And I mean, like, I can't stand the long emails. I think a lot of executives feel the same way, where I just would rather have like a single question or someone, ask something of me. Any best practices you're seeing there in terms of what you should actually be putting in your outbound?
Great question. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is 100% templatized. This is what, and no offense to marketers out there, but this is 100% marketing put together. And maybe the marketing team never actually talked to the sales team about it or got that sort of field communication. It can't be 100% templatized. We all can spot that a mile away and no one responds well to it. So for best practice, again, personalize at least 20%, do that a little bit of research, and then it goes to know your audience. If you're reaching out to an executives aren't going to read 20 pages on anything or 20 sentences. It is, what is the most relevant information that is solving a problem for them today? So if you're solving a problem today, or if this is I know you care about this right now, so that's the thing that I'm going to mention, those will start to get you that, at least the likelihood that they're going to read it. Another great best practice is if you have any sort of mutual connection. So if someone sends me a note and says, hey, I'm really good friends with Ian, he speaks really highly of you, just want to touch base, you'll at least guarantee I'm going to read that email. Hopefully I'll reply, but you'll at least guarantee I'm going to read it.
Yeah. Final thing before we get out of here too. For executives, find the channel that they have the least followers on social media, right? If they have 15,000 followers on LinkedIn and 400 on Twitter, hit them in the DMs on Twitter, right? It's like, find the path of least resistance. Lauren, any final thoughts?
Again, go back to know your audience as much as you can. Spend a little bit of time. If you were going to do an outbound campaign to someone, figure out who they are, do a little bit of research up front to make it personalized, to really connect with them. And if there's any way to capture that person in the moment of interest, that is when you're going to have the best possible results.
Thanks again, Lauren. Awesome insights, talking outbound. Next up, last person, Nick Bennett, talking about content and brand, my personal favorite. Pipeline Power Hour guest, Nick Bennett. So excited to have you on the show. A mega superstar influencer on LinkedIn, amazing content, amazing brand building. That's what we're going to talk about today.
Nick, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk about Alyce and all the things that you know about content that you want to share with our audience today. So let's start off. What's your framework for content?
Yeah, I think when creating content, it's important to consider how relevant it is to your target audience. For us, we sell to other marketers, people exactly like me. I've been having these pain points that the people were looking to solve for the last 10 years. So I feel like I'm at a bit of an advantage here. And so when we create our framework and what we want our content to be, how we want our brand to come across, which is a fun, loving, kind of like out there, somewhat edgy type of brand, we try to really relay that back into a lot of the framework that we do. And so the first thing that we consider is the context of the content. So is it timely? Is it relevant to what's happening in the industry or the world at large? If it's not, it may be not worth pursuing. And so we look at a lot of different things. For us, we're coming up on the holiday time, and that's one of our busiest seasons because so many people are trying to figure out ways to, one, close pipeline at the end of Q4, but also start to build pipeline as we move into Q1. So, the context there is incredibly important. The second piece is considering your audience. Who are you trying to reach with this content? What are their needs and wants? If the content isn't tailored to them, it's probably not going to be successful. And so we try to, again, it's easier when you have subject matter experts that have lived and breathed this for the last 10 years or so. We can really step in and feel like we know that we're walking in their shoes, and we really focus on that. The last thing that I would say is consider your goals. What do you hope to achieve with the content? And if it doesn't align to your overall marketing goals, it's also probably not worth pursuing. Content that's relevant to your target audience, timely and relevant to your industry, and aligned with your marketing goals is more likely to be successful. And so we try to keep this framework in mind when creating content. And we feel like if we do it in a way that we've done it, and we plan to execute probably about 70 new pieces of content this year, we really feel like we can hit the mark.
Interesting. 70. So why that number?
We did a lot of research. We actually, we brought on someone that manages our content engine right now, as well as SEO. And we did a lot of research, customer research, just industry research. And so we've been focusing on doubling down both on like the social content, on the blogs. We put a big piece out every year called State of Gifting. And what we do is we analyze hundreds of thousands of data points from our actual product and what people are using the product for. And then we ungate that for the world to see, because I feel like there's a lack of education in the market. And whatever we can do to contribute to that, whether to using us or using someone else, we just want people to use gifting. And we feel like we're trying to stay non-biased in a lot of these reports. We're also, on top of that, creating the first ever industry research report that is 100% why would you use gifting in 2022? Like, what's the benefit of it? And we think that's going to be it's going to be a gigantic report that we're putting out. Like, it's probably about 60 pages long, but it's going to be really phenomenal, data-driven, tactical, and we hope people are going to learn something.
And then I'd imagine you're taking that report and breaking it up into all sorts of micro content for social and otherwise over the course
Exactly.
of the year.
Yep. Breaking up. We run a lot of paid ads in both organic. We have that type of brand that people want to interact with. It's something that we've worked hard over the years to build. And even our corporate handles, people, when we don't just say, hey, come join this event, or here's a piece of content, we try to make it inviting, try to deliver value. And you'd be surprised at the amount of people that are commenting on our stuff on social, that are engaging with it, target accounts, the people that we want to actually sell to. They're just jumping in and giving us all these additional insights without us even asking for it.
Yeah, and you mentioned the timeliness of both the year for you at the end of the year, Q4, trying to figure out how to close the year strong, how corporate gifting plays into that. I just want to know, for everyone listening, if you're selling into Caspian Studios, like, please feel free. As many gifts as you want. We're taking it. Go to Alyce.com, sign up for it, figure that stuff out, because we're here for it all day, every day. But it is very timely and it is very relevant. How do you kind of focus on the stuff that is a little bit more evergreen versus the stuff that is more like right here, right now? This is immediately, this week, this month, this is critical.
Yeah, there's always going to be pieces of content that are incredibly important that we put out there. I mean, take international, for example, or compliancy, like GDPR, like all these things. It's so incredibly important that people are constantly going through the year. and they don't know how to gift. If you're in the US and you want to gift to say APAC or UK, like there's so many different regulations and traditions and things like that, that if you send the wrong thing, you could come across as a vendor that no one would ever want to deal with. And so we've put out additional, blog reports around that, and just different pieces of content that have really touched on those things. But we really try to give away, and this is something that we've done really well, we try to give away the frameworks of how to build a campaign. Again, whether you're using us or not, we'll give you the exact template to use when you're sending out your email, the type of gifts that you should be sending, the follow-up emails that you should be sending. So this is literally handing it off to someone, again, ungated, and just saying, hey, if you're going to go run a gifting program or a gifting campaign, here is how to do it, start to finish. And we are literally giving it to you word for word. And the amount of people that have said, thank you so much. And the amount of people that have actually converted from that, because they say, you're just giving away all this information for free. I figured I'd have to take a demo at that point.
Yeah, I love that. Always great when folks are saying like, I figured I'd have to get a demo to get all this information. That's usually a good sign. Is that tracked in your metrics? Like, is that one of your KPIs? People who are overwhelmed with how much love you give
Yeah,
them?
it definitely is. And so I would say last year, probably a year ago from now, we switched to the how did you hear about us on our demo form. And the amount of insights that we get are incredible, because as marketers, we love to put people in boxes. And you go to a demo form, you click the drop down. How did you hear about us? Google. Like everyone's going to put that. But the amount of insights that we're getting now, where they're specifically calling out like my content on LinkedIn, additional employees' content, specific blogs they wrote, or podcasts or events, we can start to map that entire journey. It's not just like, first touch, last touch is cool, but what about everything that happens in the middle of that journey? That's where the gold is. And that's where you start to capture a lot of these pieces that then develop future pieces of content as well.
Yeah, and I think that they're really meaningful touches. I think that that's part of why content marketing is so critical, is that it means more, right? Clicking on a number of ads is, 13, impressions equal a sale, right? If you see those 13 ads, that's one thing. But if you read a report, 60-page report, that's a totally different weighting than, clicking on a Google ad, right? If you listen to an hour of someone's podcast, like an hour of someone speaking, like what is that worth? What is it worth to have, someone that used a tool, to get a promotion or to figure out something new, and they go and tell their spouse, like, oh my gosh, I found this how-to that Alyce has on their website, and like I ran this awesome campaign. I literally got promoted. Like, what is that stuff worth? And I think that that's where in content marketing, we struggle a little bit to capture the value that we're creating. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And there's so many of those. And that's why, like, for me, I've always been under the impression, in a lot of what I try to do, is 80% of what I do is directly tied to revenue. Obviously leadership would like to see that 100%, but 80% of what I do is focused on revenue, where you can directly attribute that to revenue. The other 20%, I call it brand, experimental. What can we do to get people to talk about us, excited? Maybe social media engagement is going up, website traffic is going up. And so I like to really focus in the majority of my job specifically. I focus on that 20%, because I like to experiment with different pieces of content, whether it's through the corporate side of it, through my own personal content, whether it's blog posts, whether it's joining podcasts, because that's the thing that goes unnoticed. Like, I've done probably about 80 podcasts in the last year and a half as a guest. And so the amount of people on our inbound demo request form that mentioned they heard me about a podcast with Chris Walker or someone else, and it's that evergreen content that's always going to be out there. And it's like, it was so easy to do. It's just video that then I'm taking that raw file and I'm chopping it up, if they don't chop it up for me, and I'm distributing it on LinkedIn, TikTok, Reels, YouTube Shorts, which, I mean, we could get down into that later because I think those are going to be huge pieces for B2B moving forward. But yeah, I feel like a lot of times the goal is to increase brand awareness. And so in that case, you're going to look at like that website traffic, SEO, like is social media engagement going up? How often is your brand mentioned online? And that's an interesting one because the amount of people that tag Alyce on LinkedIn, we run a monthly like meeting where we see how many people actually have tagged Alyce and the amount of impressions that it could have driven and the amount of impact that it could have done. And there was 1 month where we got tagged about 175 times from different people, brands, individuals. And that's just all free traffic at the end of the day.
Is there a most surprising thing that you've learned in the past year with content?
I think it's just being able to really just focus on delivering value and not making it fluffy. That's another thing. Like marketers love to make fluffy stuff. And like I'm doing something about a project right now internally where I'm trying to redo our customer stories, and I'm trying to make them into playbooks and tactical playbooks, because any marketer that reads a case study, no one's going to write a bad case study. Let's be honest. They're going to make it sound all nice and awesome, but it's probably fluffy. To a certain degree, but what if you read a playbook of a customer that said, hey, I got a 537% ROI increase, and here's the 10 things I did using Alyce to get there. I think that's a game changer at that point. Not only is that going to help on the retention side of the business, it's also going to help on the acquisition side of the business.
You mentioned social. We've seen that organic social, specifically LinkedIn, publishing from people's individual accounts rather than brand accounts, publishing video specifically on the platform has absolutely crushed over the past year. What are your thoughts on how people should be thinking about social? How should people be thinking about TikTok and Instagram?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I was always not afraid of video, but I was just never big into video. And I would always be that person that would write a text post on LinkedIn. And I said, you know what? Like, I see all these people posting video and they're doing really well. And like, I was using clips from my own podcast and I would post that, and like those would do well. But what about like diving deeper and just other things? And so we started to, on an individual basis, leverage more video. And it is doing extremely well. And what I'm noticing is maybe it's not getting as many impressions as a text post, but it is getting far more engagement. And ultimately, I think that's what matters. I would much rather take a 5% engagement rate than 100,000 views on a post, and with a 1% engagement rate, because that's where the actual conversations are going to happen. That's where the business starts to happen. That's where DMs happen, where people are interested in your company. And what I've started to do is take my LinkedIn posts, and I'm still writing a good amount of them in text, but I'm then recording myself talking about that LinkedIn post and putting it on TikTok. And then I'm putting it on Reels, and then I'm putting it on YouTube Short. And so I'm taking all these things, and it's just one piece of content, but I'm really just scaling it out into all these other mediums. And it's been really, really well. And what I'll do as well is repurpose that content maybe 6 months down the road, where I'll take that TikTok video and then I'll post the video directly to LinkedIn. And even though it was a text post that I did 6 months ago, probably only 5 to 10% of your audience saw it. So it's a fresh way to come at it from a content perspective. And I mean, I've been putting content on LinkedIn for 2.5 years now. And I think it's going to definitely be a game changer for B2B, especially if B2B companies start to think of themselves as a media company versus just a traditional B2B company.
And the final thing I'd say on that is that people always think about content as like blog, video, podcast. Like that's the wrong way of thinking about it. It's like thinking of all of those things as the utility of what it is. It's a how-to. It's, an interview. It's, something that is a guide or a resource or whatever. And then doing them in video, podcast, social, like those formats. Like people just got it wrong. Like I have a podcast or a video or whatever. Like that's not how it is. It's It's go utility first, and then the platform and the format that it's supposed to be in.
Yep. And another thing on top of that is now that in-person events are back, I can't tell, like my whole strategy, I think trade shows are useless. However, I think that going with a content plan to shoot content at trade shows is going to deliver way higher ROI than sitting on a booth that's probably next to the bathroom.
Nick, this has been awesome. Thanks again for your time. Any final thoughts?
No, I think that, just think of ways that you can use content and don't be boring with it. Don't be fluffy, deliver value, and you'd be surprised at what it can do for your audience.
Awesome. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the Pipeline Power Hour. I feel like I'm drunk with ideas. My final thought for 2023 as you're doing your planning is you got to make something remarkable. Our budgets might get smaller. There's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know what the future is going to hold. But you as a marketer need to rise above the noise. And to do that, you have to create something remarkable. Thanks again for watching. Thanks to our visionary pipeline leaders.